Recording has started. So the topic of today's lecture is project cost management, and the focus of this area really is estimating and managing costs of resources. And let me just actually stop my camera as well. Estimating and managing costs of resources so that the project can be completed within the constraints of, as previously mentioned, time, scope, and cost. So today we're focusing on this part of the constraint triangle, which is the cost. The cost management and time management they're strongly connected, and there is a tool that connects them both very strongly. That's the earned value management, and this is what we're going to be looking at in depth today. And the outcome and the output of this area is cost baseline, which is then used to monitor and control the project. So we need to understand the basic terms, I suppose. So price is what you get from the customer for the product or project or service. The estimate is a guess of the quantity of money required to deliver that product or service. So that's the estimate. Budget is the combination of estimates that were made for the delivery of the product or service. The approved estimate is the budget that had been put through all the hoops and loops through managerial approval and is available for project use. And the actual cost is the cost that is actually incurred at the end of the project or any of the reporting periods or project phases. So in general, the budget shouldn't be more than the price to keep some sort of a profit margin. So price is the maximum price. Price gives us what the maximum budget should be. If the budget is greater than the price, maybe investing in the project isn't such a good idea after all. We need to understand that more emerging trends is some stakeholders have different approaches and different tolerances, different points of view on to how costs are estimated and how costs are tolerated and so on. We need to be able to understand that this particular knowledge area is very frequently outsourced because of the increased use of I have the microphone all the way away. Didn't realize of the increased use of specialized costing tools. And again, there is an increasing strength in the trend of use of earned value management as a go-to tool for project monitoring and control. So one thing that I need to mention before getting into the meat of things is this concept of the life cycle costing, which is becoming a little bit more prevalent. And life cycle costing is taking into consideration not just the cost of the project, but as well as that, what would the product cost to the client after the project is finished and handed over. What are going to be the maintenance costs, the costs of running of the product, things like overheads, upkeep, part cost, and so on. And for some projects, the life cycle costing might be important, and they might be important for the customer as well. To understand the life cycle costing, as in a given example, we see that one car A has much, car one, the one that has a red bar over here, has much lower costs during the project phase, so planning execution, but the costs are steadily increasing throughout the operations and maintenance through the disposal. And
if you consider the life cycle costing as something that occurs over many years, the accumulated cost of use of the first car might be a lot higher than the accumulated use of the second car. So from that point of view, it might make a more economical decision by the customer to select the second car rather than the first one, even though the original cost of the first car is actually somewhat less than of the second car. But nonetheless, over the life cycle of the product, it might make a sufficient difference in order to influence the customer decision. And I mentioned here that it's connected to the cost of quality, because to achieve the quality that will be sufficient and satisfactory to the customer throughout the life cycle of the product or service, the cost might be prohibitive. Frequently increasing the quality of a product is exponentially more costly. To go from yields of 95% to yields of 97 might cost 3 to 5 or even more times as much as going from yield of 70 to 90, simply because the low-hanging fruit and the easy wins have all been picked and used to increase the yield and the quality of the product. So anyway, we're not really concerning ourselves with the life cycle of the product as such. We're only concerning ourselves with the cost life cycle within the project management. So that's within this knowledge area. And you can see that this is within the initiation, planning, execution, monitoring, and controlling, which are occurring at the same time, and finally closing. So this is where this knowledge area is made. So we have 4 processes. 3 processes belong to the planning process group: plan, cost management, estimate costs, and determine budget. There are no processes belonging within the execution process group, and we have one and only one process within monitoring and controlling the costs. No processes in closing. So let's get right into it. So the first process that we're going to consider is planning, cost management. And I suppose maybe the pattern becomes apparent if you think about the scope management knowledge area or schedule management knowledge area. You see that before you start dealing with actual planning for cost management, first you prepare a plan. You plan for managing costs. So you prepare a plan on how the cost is going to be dealt with, and that's the essential purpose of this process. So in this process, we're going to create a little subsidiary project management plan, which is going to tell us how the project cost will be estimated, how it's going to be budgeted, what are going to be the procedures for managing those costs, how are they going to be monitored and controlled. And through that, we're going to have a document that will provide us with effective guidance and direction for managing costs. So this process will establish all the procedures, all the granularities, all the currencies that we're going to be using, all the thresholds for intervention that we're going to be paying attention while monitoring this this knowledge area. And I suppose one thing to mention here is that if we spend time planning for cost management, and if we include sufficient amount of detail and resolution into planning for the cost management, this plan is becoming to be more practical and is going to cover more of the territory that we're going to be dealing with. So we have 4 inputs, 3 tools, and a single output. So the inputs include project charter, which should usually contain the overall budget for the project, and that overall budget should inform our cost management plan, because it's going to, in the end, form basis. And the budget that arises as a result of the cost management might be the same as the budget that we had planned for in preparation of the project charter, but the one that we produce in planning for cost management or managing costs shouldn't be greater in any case. Then project management plan will provide documents like scope baseline or the time baseline, as well as risks associated with not managing or not meeting the cost of the project. We're going to see some details of any contracts with the customers or suppliers, any constraints on the cost regarding to materials or orders and so on. So anything that project management plan contains that could affect how we manage the cost in the project should be included as an input into this process. We're also going to have a couple of important enterprise environmental factors, and they are very actually critical in this case, especially if the project is being carried out by a multinational company. Where I worked, the company where I worked, all the costing was carried out in dollars, even though the company was operating in a eurozone. So you can see how the exchange rate could have significant impact on the resulting project costs. But also the other set of environmental factors will include the structure of the company, how the costing, reporting, and decision making is carried out, how the customs are regulated. Are there any tariffs or duties or fees involved? What are the kind of standards for paperwork that needs to be satisfied? Are there any cultural differences in how a business is being done? Are there any ethical frameworks that we need to follow while dealing with costs and so on? So there's quite an interesting set of factors that are going to be affecting it, and are going to contribute to how we produce the cost management plan. And finally, the organizational process assets for this process include things like templates, procedures that have already been established, tested, and improved upon many projects that we had carried out. Any data from the past on how cost management was carried out, and so on. Anything that helps in creating a meaningful and practical cost management plan is useful. Then we're going to use the following tools and techniques. Obviously, expert judgment, coming from anybody who can provide practical guidance into how cost management is done. And that could include consultants, accountants, people who are involved in the procurement, people from project management office, domain experts, and so on. Again, anybody who has specific knowledge that could contribute to the development of a practical and useful cost management plan. We're going to do some data analysis, and one particular data analysis that needs to be highlighted here as alternatives analysis, because we will have to figure out when and how much funding will be required for specific stages of the project. We're going to look at the alternatives of thresholds for when the alarm bells are going to ring for tendency to go over budget. What kind of ratio of debts to equities should be needed to fund the project, especially for large infrastructure projects. And also we would include into this techniques like the present value of money, discounted rate, the internal rate of investment, and our return. Again, those we highlighted previously when we are talking about viability of the project from the point of view of cost and fitting within the organizational strategy. And obviously meetings, because nothing good has ever happened without a meeting being held. But like realistically, we will need the stakeholders and experts to meet in order to carry out those techniques and arrive at the cost management plan. So cost management plan, we have a graphical representation here of what it includes, and I have a list here which essentially we have a whole bunch of items. So units of measure. So what are we measuring and in what units, so that when we are providing quotations or when we're costing things that are being measured, we know what do we need to measure it in. So for instance, if we talk about travel, how much do we charge for travel? Is it per mile or per kilometer? And what's the associated cost, so that we can use those quantities, units of measure, and maybe costs associated with those units of measure in order to create costs. Level of precision, so what kind of number of significant digits do we require in order to provide quotations, whether we need to go to single dollars, to significant figures, nearest thousand, and so on. So that also should be included. Level of accuracy, when we're estimating a cost of an activity and we don't have sufficiently detailed knowledge about the parameters of that activity to estimate accurately what the cost is, we should be able to estimate that cost within some range, and the cost management plan will specify what range is that. We're going to have some organizational procedure links, so that will provide a connection between the cost and work breakdown structure through formation of cost center. So if you remember from the work breakdown structure, each of the lowest level deliverables of the project is called a work package, and according to the project management philosophy, each work package should have its own cost center or cost account. So each deliverable should have its own cost account, and this is how the organizational links are formed between costing and work packages. We will also provide some rules for measurement of the cost performance, where we're going to be determining the cost performance. It should be EVM, sorry for the typo. We're going to be looking at the earned value management techniques, and how often and to what extent we're going to be applying those techniques, and tracking methodologies for costs. We're also going to look at some thresholds and some benchmarks, so positive and negative variances. We're going to look at who's going to be approving the costs. So is it the guiding committee, or is it the project manager? Is it the sponsor? Does it have to be within the organizational management, and so on? Templates, who are the stakeholders involved in the costing, and so on. So there's quite a lot of detail that could go into granular cost management plan, and additional details could include strategic funding, specifically if we're talking about large infrastructure projects, and also how are we going to be dealing with inevitable currency fluctuations. So going to the next part, we have estimating costs. So this is the process where the total project costs is estimated, and I suppose the project manager and the team, maybe some stakeholders, would come together and sit down and try to estimate as realistically as possible, considering the information that they have at hand, how much the project would cost until it's complete. And in the ideal case scenario, the costing information would be broken down at more granular level, if possible at activity level. If not possible, then it would be done at the phase level. So before I go in, I want to just make sure that we understand the distinction between the types of costs that are out there, and those types of costs are there in order to enable us to categorize costs that are accrued while the project is being carried out. So we have two kind of main levels of categorizing it. So whether the cost changes or whether the cost directly contributes to the project work. So if the cost changes based on the use of a given resource, then we call that cost variable. An example would be, let's say, cement. The more cement you use, the less, or the more, actually, I don't know what are the trends in the industry, but I would assume that the lower the price per ton of cement is. So that's why the cost would be variable, whereas fixed costs are costs elements which are independent of the rate of use. So, for instance, if you're renting an office in order to carry out project work, and that office is rented per, 1,200 euros per square feet, or something other ridiculous number like that. I don't know what are the rates, maybe less than 1,200 anyway. But that rate doesn't change whether you're in the office 2 hours a week or 23 hours a day. So the rate is going to remain the same. And the other type of categorizing costs is direct, indirect. So direct is a cost element that's charged to a specific project and directly contributes to project work. So, for example, if you're building a pavement, the cost of the paving bricks is going to be directly contributing to the project work, and it's not going to be contribute to any other project. So that's why it's a direct cost. And indirect costs are costs that are contributing not only to this specific project, but also all the other projects and all the other work of the organization. So electricity in the office or canteen, things like that, the aircon in the office. So that's an indirect cost. And every cost can be categorized based on this. So we could have direct, fixed, direct variable, indirect fixed, and indirect variable based on that categorization. So the inputs into estimating costs are as follows. We have project management plan, and that includes cost management plan, quality management plan, and also scope baseline. Cost management plan will essentially tell us how are we supposed to deal with estimating the cost, what kind of technique and procedure we're going to be using really. Scope baseline is going to tell us the details of the boundaries of the project. So what is that we are going to do? And it will also contribute the list of the work packages that need to be completed during the project work, so that we can carry out our estimating procedures. And the quality management plan will contain the indicators on the quality, so that we can estimate the cost of quality as well. Again, the cost management plan will also add the levels of tolerance, the accepted ranges, units of measurement, the currencies, the resolution of the cost analyses, and so on. Project documents should include the register of lessons learned. So anything that happened in the past that might contain the knowledge that should help us in estimating costs for this particular project. So as the project is progressing and we're learning more lessons, we're going to be relying on lessons learned more and more. Because as the project is progressing and we are learning more about the nature of work and the kind of characteristics that work has and the costs associated with the work. We are going to use that information in adjusting our estimates of costs as we are reviewing as we are carrying out cost estimates at further stages of the project. We're also going to use project schedule, because obviously we're going to have all the activities listed in the project schedule. We're going to have the resources available and allocated to the project schedule. We're going to have time reserves that we estimated for each of the activities, and those inputs would be useful in determining costs of the project. We're going to have resource requirements, which is essentially going to tell us what resources are required for which work and for how long is that going to be taking place. It's going to cost you differently to pay, let's say, master engineer than a trainee technician type of thing. Those resources are going to cost differently, and we need to have an understanding of what those differences are. And last but not least is the risk register, which should contain some information about their contingency reserves, which is essentially extra money that might help us if we're struggling with the budget. And obviously EFs and OPAs. So EFs, market conditions, information about the state of the market, the exchange rates, inflation, things like that. And OPAs, the policies for estimating costs, the costing templates, the software, and so on. Now we're going to use 8 tools and techniques, starting with expert judgment, going through different types of estimating, and then some data analysis, PMIS, and some decision-making techniques. So expert judgment, again, anyone with knowledge that could contribute to effective, accurate, and correct estimating of the costs of a given activity, and such way that that estimate is as close to reality as possible, should be used for this process. Those experts could be, project managers with years experience, consultants, costing professionals, accountants, or project management office. And then we're going to use a number of different estimating techniques in order to estimate project costs. And in a similar way as we would have for project schedule or the activity duration estimation. So analogous estimation basically suggests that we will take a look at the data from the past for a similar project, and we're going to use the cost estimates from an actual costs from that project in order to estimate the costs of the current project. We should probably do it if we don't have much details about the current project, or we don't have enough time to find out more details so that we can create a more detailed estimation. So we will look at project details for this project. We will look at similar project from the past, and then we would use that to estimate the costs for this project. A more accurate way of estimating costs is parametric estimating. So parametric estimating will use the formula with certain values that we already know about the costs, and we're going to use that to estimate the cost of the project. So triangular uses tree, uses highest, most optimistic, and pessimistic, and divides it by tree. But we're going to encourage using the beta distribution based estimation, where to get the cost estimate, we take the pessimistic estimate of the cost, we add 4 of the most likely cost estimates, and then we add optimistic estimate of the cost divided by 6 to get a reasonably accurate estimating of the cost. And so that's the second one. And I suppose what we can take a look here is that we have 2 different types of top-down estimating. So graph and order of magnitude would allow us to estimate the cost of a given activity, or looking top-down. So rather than focusing on each activity, we'll just look at them in more general terms. And analogous and parametric, it's in a similar way. But bottom-up estimating is the most detailed method of estimating. So for this method of estimating, we are taking a look at the activity. We are taking a look at the resources that we're going to need for a given activity. And we're going to figure out how much is it going to cost us to have the activity carried out at the most granular level from the work breakdown structure. And then we're going to combine those estimates from the lowest all the way up to the highest, so that we can arrive at a reasonably accurate estimate of the cost of the project. And within that type of estimating, we can expect our accuracy to be within 5 to 10%. And last, we're going to have to carry out some data analyses. So that's going to take a look at alternatives analysis. So alternatives for for project work, like whether to use tractors or forklifts, whether to use 15-ton lorries or 40-ton lorries, whether we want to use machines or laborers, or making something in-house or outsourcing it. And then deciding obviously whether which of the alternatives is the most cost effective for a given project. And I suppose each alternative would have some costs, and therefore estimating and comparing those costs should be important. A reserve analysis is something that's going to be quite important, because it's going to allow us to determine the amount of extra money that is required above the standard project cost. So we're going to estimate the cost of the project, but the reserve analysis is also going to tell us whether we are going to require some extra amount of money in order to provide for identify risks. So risks that we would know from risk register, the known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. So risks that we are unable to identify. Now, the known unknowns would be slightly different than the unknown unknowns, because the contingency reserves are associated with activities wouldn't be the same as the management reserve, which is essentially to a discretion of a manager whether any of the unknown unknowns shows up and requires contribution from the management. Cost of quality is the amount of money that we would have to spend on achieving the required quality standards and also maintaining them. Everyone has to spend some money on cost of quality, whether it's to defect inspections, whether it's to reworks, and so on. And if we don't estimate this amount of money and we don't add it to the project costs, obviously our budget estimate is going to be understated. And things that should go into cost of quality include things like defect reviews, testing, as mentioned, rework, and so on. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this when we talk about quality management. And last but not least, we're going to have to make some decisions while we're estimating costs of our activities. So techniques like voting, like brainstorming, like Delphi technique, like nominal group technique, like affinity diagrams should be used to get stakeholders and experts to both give their inputs and to obtain consensus on cost estimates. And using the kind of structured decision-making techniques helps us to get buy-in and confirmation of the agreement from the stakeholders, which might be quite valuable for a long-term project success. When we complete this process, we're going to have 3 outputs. So we're going to have cost estimates, which is essentially the numbers which will tell us how much money in a specified currency our activities or the cost of the project going to be. This could be at the level of the project, or it could be broken down per phase, or it could be broken down to individual work package. And maybe could include as well, could take into consideration the changes in the environment. So maybe take into consideration the possibility of inflation and so on. Basis of the estimates is the list of the assumptions and the knowledge that we had while we were estimating, when we are estimating the costs of given activities. And we might have to update project documents, things like the schedule or the log of assumptions, the calendars of the resource availability, and so on. So now we have the costs are estimated. So now we can get after determining the budget. So determining the budget, budget is nothing but the cost estimates that had been approved by the management. And from the point of being approved, it become the budget and the reference point for the cost tracking for the project. I suppose we need to be aware that there is a difference between the project budget and the cost baseline. So it's important that we understand it. Now, when budget is released, it's not released as a lump sum. It's it's apportioned. It's given per the work packages or per phases or the project activities, depending on how we decided to structure the costing of our project. And it includes the contingency reserves for identified risks and the management reserve for the unidentified risks. And cost estimates, which is the budget, plus the contingency reserves, is what gives us the cost baseline. Now, just because the identified risks are accounted for doesn't mean that this is the only risks that's applicable. So that's why, as I mentioned, we are going to have the management reserve. So once we add the project and the contingency reserves and the management reserves, and also we're going to have the total project budget. So cost baseline doesn't include the management reserve. It just includes the costs of the activities and the contingency reserves. The management reserve is extra. It's included in the budget, but it's not a part of a cost baseline. So to determine budget, we're going to have 6 inputs. We're going to have project management plan that will bring in the cost management plan, the resource management plan, the baseline for the project scope. We're going to use cost management plan and scope baseline for the same reason as in the previous process. So cost management plan tells us how to estimate the costs, what are our currencies, what are our accuracy levels, what are the estimates range, and so on. The scope baseline provides a list of activities down to the lowest granular level. Resource management plan should provide the rates, essentially the costs of resources per unit of time, costs per travel, or what are the kind of per diem costs if we're traveling, what are the allowances, and so on. And other information related to resources that could be important in determining the budget of the project. We're going to use a number of project documents. So the first is the basis of estimates. Basis of estimates, which is going to contain the basis or the foundations of our estimating process. What did we use to estimate given costs, and why did we use that? The schedule for the project schedule should contain milestones, phases, and summary tasks against which the project budget will be apportioned. So if phase 1 requires 10,000 and phase 2 requires 22,000 and so on. So what those phases are comes from the project schedule. Risk register is going to provide us with the information about risks and the amounts required to set aside as contingency reserves. And hopefully also some cost estimates for the risk responses. Business documents provide the financial KPIs, so success factors, and the benefits management plan should tell us what do we need to track in order to make sure that once the project is finished, we can realize the strategic benefit that was behind initiating the initiating of the project. We're also going to include the agreements with the customers so that we understand the upper limits for the budget. We understand what the price was so that we don't exceed the price. And we're also going to have the environmental factors and organizational property process assets as per previous processes. Tools and techniques for this process include expert judgment. So anybody with knowledge that can contribute to the determination and approval of meaningful and practical budget should be included in this category of individuals. Cost aggregation is a technique that allows us to combine the budgeted amounts at the work package levels and bring them together through the cost account levels all the way up to the project level. So essentially, we're adding up the costs for each of the activities, each of the deliverables, to combine it into the budget. Data analysis, in particular reserves analysis, should help us understand the amounts to be set aside for contingency reserves and the management reserves. Now, actually, worth mentioning that there mightn't be any management reserve at all. We're also going to carry out some historical information review, just to get some sanity about our cost estimates and the budget. So we're looking at historical projects and use them as benchmarks for validating the current estimates, so that we understand and we can assure ourselves that the budget that we have for this project is not totally out of control or out of ideas. Now, as this process is repeated throughout the life cycle of the project, technique called the funding limit reconciliation is being utilized in order to note or compare what had been spent against what had been allocated per phase. So we're going to be looking whether we are within the limits that we specified for ourselves within the budget. Okay, so then the last technique that I want to mention here is the financing. So this is the process of gathering funds from the external sources for capital projects, let's say for large projects, especially if those external funds are required. So then once we complete this project, we're going to produce the following three outputs: cost baseline, the project funding requirements, and some of the document updates. The cost baseline is the budgeted amount for each of the phases of the project, together with the contingency reserves for the activities. It's a reference point with which we're going to be comparing our project work data, so that we know whether the project is performing or not. We're also going to have the periodic funding requirements as an output for this project. So how much each of the stages or phases of the project is required, and the funding period that is decided has to be consistent. And project documents like project schedule, basis of estimates, resource calendars, and so on can be updated depending on the requirement. Now, what we're also going to produce is something like this S-curve, where we are going to have project time on the horizontal axis. So in this direction, we're going to have project cumulative costs, so all the costs of the project that we're accruing. And we can use this cost baseline to compare with the actuals. So as the project is progressing, we're going to be accruing some actual costs, and the cumulative actual expenditure, is what we're going to be comparing against the baseline. Anytime we are below the baseline is good from the point of view of cost performance, but if our forecasting indicates that we are going to exceed the baseline below the end of the project, we are going to be in a little bit of trouble. So using this cost baseline S-curve is a useful tool that we can apply for cost control. So then once we're through the process of determining budget, we can start getting after controlling the costs. And as the name suggests, this is the process where the actual costs of the project are compared with the cost baseline. to understand whether the project is progressing, to understand the project status, and to prepare some forecasts for the future project performance. And this process is also used for managing changes, creating and managing changes to the cost baseline. Now, we're not only tracking the project costs, so we're doing a lot of other things. So we're comparing the expenditures with the budgets. We're looking at the financial health of the project in terms of our contingency reserves, the amount of money still remaining. We're handling all the changes affecting the budget. We're tracking the budget at micro and macro level. So expenditure per activity, but also expenditure per phases. We're forecasting our financial health into the future. We're looking at the variances. So variances are really important to understand the project performance. We want the variances to be positive. Negative variances are trouble. We're also going to be looking at the trends in those variances, keeping stakeholders informed, and so on. So then, as inputs into this project, we're going to have 5 items. We're going to use 4 tools and techniques, and we're going to have 5 outputs. Before I go into outputs and inputs, I wanted to just mention a couple of the possible reasons for ineffective cost management. Office politics, one of them. Risk management not being carried out properly. We wouldn't have lack of consistency in reporting and controlling. The work breakdown structure not adequate for the job. Bad estimating with unrealistic budget. A schedule that is not practical, or management forcing budget due to budget constraints. So quite a few, and they all could contribute to project failure. But as far as inputs to the controlling budget are concerned, we're going to have the management plan, project management plan, consisting mainly of cost management plan, cost baseline, performance measurement baseline. So the performance measurement baseline is a reference point to kind of check what effect of any cost variance has on the overall project and the project schedule. The performance baseline is kind of also showing which baseline cannot be compromised and which elements have some flexibility that would help with making decisions about the changes into the project. Cost baseline is made up of the budget and the contingency reserves. So this is what we're going to be comparing the project performance against. And the management plan should tell us how often should we do this comparison, when, and how. The work performance data is the output from the directing and managing project work process. So this is the data that contains the actual current project performance for costs, and we're going to compare those actual cost performance data with the baselines that you just mentioned to produce information about variances, to identify what is the current health of the project, and so on. Tools and techniques that we're going to be using for this project involve the following. We have project management plan, mainly cost management plan, things like cost baseline. Sorry, what I'm talking about, expert judgment. So tools and techniques, I got carried away here, should have changed. Yes. So expert judgment includes any individuals with expertise that can provide us with more meaningful, more accurate monitoring and controlling of the project cost. We're going to do some data analysis, and I'm going to start with earned value analysis because this is the critical technique for this, and it's going to be worth 25% for you in the next week's exam. So earned value analysis is an analytical technique that allows us to track cost and schedule of the project, provide status reporting, current condition of the project. It can help us in forecasting future project performance, and so on. And the best way to understand how it works is to look at an example. So an example over here, we are working on the project management team. We're asked for an update on how the project is progressing for completion in terms of budget and schedule. And below table provides details of project performance at the end of week 22. So note that in current, we have planned duration. For at the end of week 22, we planned that activity A, which was planned to take 3 weeks, would have those 3 weeks completed. And in fact, we completed those 3 weeks. We're looking at activity B, which was planned to have 12 weeks duration. We were planning that at the end of week 22, we would complete those 12 weeks, but actually we only completed 11 of those weeks. For activity C, we planned that the activity will take 4 weeks. At the end of week 22, we would have 3 out of those 4 weeks of work completed. Or this is a unit, so it could be any unit, day, and so on. But it's just kind of allows us to figure out the fraction of the work. I'll get to that in a second. But in actual fact, we only completed 2 weeks of 2 weeks of work here. For activity D, we were planning that this activity is going to take 6 weeks. We were planning to have 3 weeks completed at the end of week 22. In actual fact, we completed only 1 week of work. And for activity E, 2 weeks planned. We planned to have 0 weeks done, and we've done 0 weeks anyway. Now, each of those activities has some cost associated with it in the original budget, and each of those activities has some actual cost accrued to date. So using this information, this is the information that we need for earned value analyses. Using this information, we are going to calculate the following. So we're going to find the planned value, and the planned value is going to give us the estimated value of the work planned to date. So this is going to be some sum of money. We're going to find earned value. So we're going to estimate the value of the work actually done. Now we're going to have the actual cost. So that's already given. We're going to figure out what's the budget at completion of the project. So what's the total budget at the completion of the project? Using planned value, earned value, and actual cost, we're going to be able to estimate the budget at completion. We're going to estimate the cost remaining to complete the project. We're going to be able to estimate the complete duration of the project based on the current project performance. And we're going to be able to estimate variances at the completion. So variance between the planned budget and the actual budget. The budget that we're estimating is going to be actual. So some of those variances are given here. Cost variance is the earned value less actual cost. Now, if actual cost is the same as earned value, then we have no variance. We're exactly on plan. If we have positive cost variance, then we're under budget. We're spending less than we were expecting. If the variance is negative, we're over budget. We're spending more. Schedule variance is earned value minus the planned value. So if we are ahead of schedule, the variance will be positive. If we are behind schedule, variance will be negative. Cost performance index is an important parameter telling us essentially how fast are we burning money. So it's going to tell us, how fast we're spending, and it's calculated. We have to divide earned value by the actual cost. Schedule performance index. It shows us the efficiency of time use. Less than 1 means not efficient, so we're progressing at less than the planned rate. We're going to have those estimate at completion. So estimate at completion is budget at completion over cost performance index. Now, if our cost performance index is equal to 1, then we can, I suppose we can expect that our budget at completion is going to be the same. Estimated budget at completion is going to be the same as planned budget at completion. So if the work is progressing at the rate it should, everything is fine. Estimated to complete is the difference between the budget estimated at completion and the actual cost. So how much more money do we need to spend in order to complete the project work? Estimated complete duration of the project is planned duration divided by the scheduled performance index. So that's kind of self-explanatory. Variance at completion for the budget is budget at completion minus estimated at completion. So we're going to calculate the estimated budget at completion, and we're going to subtract that from budget at completion. If positive means that variance is positive and we're under budget. If negative, then we're in trouble. The project is over budget. To complete performance index is telling us the efficiency required to meet the project target. So in other words, how fast do we have to work in order to complete on plan? I'll have a slide on TCBI in just a second. Couple of tips for earned value management. So the first thing is to calculate the earned value and then the planned value. So the variances are calculated from earned value. Indexes are calculated as a ratio of earned value. Planned value relates to schedule. Actual cost is obviously related to costs. Negative values are bad, positive values are good. If indexes are greater than 1, then things are going well, except for the total to complete performance index. So if that index is greater than 1, we have to work at 100 and something rate of performance in order to complete on target. And you can think about it this way. You arrange to meet a friend at 7. The friend is 30 minutes away from you in terms of 30 miles, not 30 minutes rather, sorry. So 6:30 you traveled 10 miles. How fast you travel so far? So obviously you only travel 10 miles, and now you have to go at a speed slightly higher than maybe you have been going so far, because you only have 30 minutes left if you want to be on time. So you have to go faster now than you had gone previously. So just a couple of just a summary slide on the indexes. So we have cost performance index, earned value over the actual cost, rate of money spending. For example, 200 over 300, 2 over 3. Scheduled performance index provides the rate of utilizing time. So earned value 200, earned value 200, planned value 400. So we're behind schedule. We're not utilizing time as good as we would like to. And you have the interpretations to the right. Useful to add interpretations in some exam questions, but we don't have to do it on Monday. Okay, so here's our example. So I'm going to add 2 columns here, one for planned value, and I'm going to add 1 column for earned value. Okay, so add all those figures are given to us at the end of week 19. So that's what we're going to be treating as such at the end of week 19. And obviously activity E is not required for this because activity E, 2 days more. So 312, that's 15 plus 4, that's 6, let's say, sorry, 15, 19, 6, and so on, and 2. So I'm just going to ignore this for a second. So for activity A, total planned 3 weeks, planned complete 3 weeks, actually complete 3 weeks. So planned value at the end of week 19 is the same as the amount from the budget. So this is what we're going to be using to calculate planned value and earned value. So actually complete 3 weeks. So planned value is 9,500. And earned value is also 9,500 because we did all the work. So for activity B, 12, 12, and 11. So planned value is the same as the original budget, 68,000. But note that we only completed 11 out of 12 weeks. So the earned value is the actual complete over the planned value here, or planned complete rather. So in this case, it's going to be 11 over 12, and multiply it by 6,800, which is the 68,000, which is the original budget. So we only earned 11/12 of that 68,000. So if I do this, 11 divided by 12 by 68,000, so that's 62,333. So that's the earned value, 62,333. For activity C, total planned 4, we planned to have 3 out of 4 of those weeks completed, so 75%. 75% of 9,000 is 6,750. But we only completed 2 out of those 4 weeks, so we only actually got 4,500, 4,500. For activity D, we have 6 planned, 6 total, 3 planned to complete, 3 planned to complete, but we only completed 3, 11, 2, 1. So sorry, we completed 1. So we plan to complete half of the work by the end of that week. So half of 12,500 is 6,250, but we only completed 1 out of 1 out of those 6 weeks. So we only completed a sixth of 12,500. So we completed 2,083. So that's the earned value. We only earned this much. And for last activity, 0, 0, and 0. Then once I have that, I'm going to sum all those values. So let me just erase this. So for planned value, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, planned value 9,500 plus 6,800 plus 6,750 plus 6,250. So we planned to sorry, 1 second. 90,500 is the planned value. Earned value, on the other hand, $78,416. And also actual cost to get 92,300. Okay, so now I have the 3 quantities that I require to find the cost variance. So cost variance CV, usually the same. So cost variance is earned value minus actual cost. And in this case, earned value 78,416, actual cost 92,300. 72, 78, 416 minus 92,300, 300. So the cost variance is 13,884 negative minus 13,884 over budget. We're overspending. Scheduled variance is earned value minus planned value. So 78 minus 9050 minus 12,084. Cost performance index, CPI, earned value over actual cost. So in this case, it's 78,416 divided by 92,300, and that is equal to 0.84. We're overspending. Scheduled performance index, SPI, is earned value over the planned value, and that is what is it? Earned value, planned value, earned value over the planned value. So 78416 divided by 90500. So that's 0.86, 0.8687 actually, rounding up. We're behind the schedule. So to do some estimates, we need original budget, estimates at completion. So we need original budget. Budget at completion is budget for all the activities added together, including the activity E, which we don't need for at the end of day 19 because it's planned complete zero and complete zero, but it's part of the total budget. So the total budget is 9,500 plus 68,000 plus 9,000 plus 12,500 plus 3,600. So actual budget is 102,600. So that's the total budget, 102,600. That's a zero here. So now to get estimated at completion, estimate at completion, I'm going to get budget at completion divided by cost performance index, and that is equal to 102,600 divided by 0.84, and that is equal to 1,020,200, 142, 142. So that's estimated at completion, and using this parameter we can find out what's the variance at completion. So that EAC minus BAC. So estimate at completion minus budget at completion. So that's 12141 minus 102. The other way around. Sorry. Should be budget at completion. It should be first because obviously we're trying to find out whether in relation to budget. I apologize for this mistake. So that's minus 19,542. Minus 19,542. Yeah, and that's a reasonable place to stop for this one. Then the next, we have a machine design build project that is in the implementation stage, and we have to analyze the project from the table below to to produce the earned value analysis. So I'm going to, again, I'm not going to do all of this because in the interest of time. So for this, when I'm doing the planned value calculation, earned value calculations, I always add two columns. So the first one is planned value, the second is earned value. So at the end of that 10th week, planned value for activity A is 20,000. For activity B, we plan to have completed 5 weeks again, so that will be in relation to original budget 24,000. For activity C, we plan to have it completed, so the same as the original budget for that activity, 34. For activity D, we are planning to have completed 3 out of 7, so 3 over 7 multiplied by 42. So 18,000. So that's our planned value. For activity E, we're planning to have 3 quarters completed here. So that's 13,500. For activity F, a fifth is planned to be completed. Fifth of 26,000 is 5,200. And we're not planning to have anything completed here. Now, earned value is related to actual complete work in relation to the original budget. So for activity A, earned value is the same as the original budget because we have completed all of the planned work. So that will be 20,000 here. Activity B, we only completed 4 out of 5 planned. 4 out of 5 planned, or 4 out of 5 weeks. So 80% of 24,000. 0.8 times 24,000 is 19,200. Activity C, 5 weeks complete out of 7. So 5/7 times 40. Sorry, am I right? Yeah, 5/7 times. Actually, I apologize. I think I made a mistake in the calculation here because I multiplied by the wrong number. So 24. Let me just redo those. Sorry about that, lads. So 5 out of 7 out of 34. Okay. 24,285. For this, 3/7 out of 42. So that is 18.
Sorry, for the for C there.
Yes.
Is it not 7 out of 7 for the plan for the
Oh
PV?
yeah, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. You see, I'm getting confused myself now. I think it's time to finish this lecture, lads. Thank you. Of course, because 7 out of 7 that's planned is planned completed. 34. Yeah, sorry. And here is 3 out of 7 out of 42, so 18,000. 3 out of 4 out of 18, 6 to 1350 rather. 13,500. And finally, 5th of 26, so 5,200. And here, so for activity C, actually complete 5 out of 7. So we only completed 5 out of 7 times 34,000. So 24,285 sits here, 24,285. For this one, we completed 3 out of 7 out of 42. So the same as planned, 18,000. For the next one, we completed 2 out of 5 out of 26. 2, 3, 4. Am I skipping this? Sorry, 2 out of 4 out of 18. So that will be 9,000 here. And finally, 2 out of 5 out of 26. So that will be 10,400. Okay, so now we have the earned value. And for the calculations, I need to sum the budget, sum the planned value and the earned value. So I'll do it for the planned value first. Planned value 276,700. 276. Earned value 100,000 885. I feel like I made a mistake in this calculation somewhere, so bear with me. I apologize again. This seems reasonable, so there is a mistake there. 20 plus 24 into 3 plus.
I think you might have added as at 52,000 rather than.
That's what I'm
5,000.
thinking. That
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking there. Okay, it'll come out close in just a second. Yeah, 34,000 plus 13,500 plus. Yeah, okay, 9.6, and much better now, much more reasonable. So 96,700. 96,700 is the planned value. So now we can start calculating for cost variance. That's earned value minus actual cost. So actual cost, I suppose I need to find that too. Plus 19,000 plus 25,000 plus 14 plus 12 plus 10. So that's 102. 2,000. So now I have actual cost. I'll add budget when I need it. Cost variance 102,000 minus 100,885 minus 102,000. So that will be 100,885 minus 1115. So that's cost variance. Earned value minus actual cost. Schedule variance is earned value minus planned value. So that's 1,885 minus 96,700, 4185 plus 4185. Negative cost variance, we are over budget. Positive schedule variance, we are ahead of schedule. So CPI, cost performance index, earned value over actual cost. So that's 0.989. Scheduled performance index, SPI. So that's planned value, earned value over the planned value rather. So that's 100,885 divided by 96,700. So that's it's 1.04. 1.04. So we're going ahead of the schedule. And I'm just going to add the budget at completion, and then the variances you can calculate once you know the estimate of the budget at completion. So the total original budget is 20,000 plus 24,000 plus 34,000 plus 42,000 plus 18,000 plus 26, and finally plus 6. So the planned budget is 170,000, 170,000. So now I can calculate the estimated budget at completion. EAC is the same as 1700. So the planned budget divided by cost performance index, so 0.989. So that is equal to 171,890. So that would be the estimated budget at completion. And from here, we can calculate the variances, the variance at completion, and the amount of money required to complete, estimated to completion, and so on. Actually, I haven't calculated that. So before, in the previous example, estimated to complete is the same as estimated at completion minus the actual cost, so the current cost. So this will tell us the required amount of money that we need to spend in order to complete the project if we're going to perform at the same rate. So that's 171,890 minus actual cost of 102,000. So we need to spend 68,000 for this project, 68,890. So estimated to completion. Okay, and we can also calculate variance at completion by subtracting budget at completion and minus estimated budget at completion. So these are like very straightforward calculations. Step 1, calculate the planned value. Step 2, calculate the earned value based on the amount of actual completed work and total planned duration in referring to the original budget. So these are the 3 things that you need for the earned value. And then the rest is just applying the little formulas that you have in the formula handout sheet. That's the end value, earned value completed. And now, if you remember, we have 5 outputs for this process, and the key output is the work performance information that tells us all the relevant project health information that we could then use in order to react to what's happening in project lifecycle. We can understand whether the project is under budget, over budget, behind schedule, ahead of schedule, and then we can react accordingly by producing change requests, which are another output of this process if some corrective actions or preventative actions are required. We're also going to produce cost forecasts based out, those estimated at completion, the estimated to completion, the variance at completion. These are forecasts for the costs that are, going to be useful for the managing committees. And there's another parameter called the TCPI, so to complete performance index. And I will go back to this example. So note, what can I do? I don't have space. So to complete performance index, we take the estimated at completion. Estimated at completion, sorry, we need the budget at completion and earned value, and budget at completion and actual cost. So I will erase this side here and do this calculation. Okay, so TCPI is BAC, budget at completion, minus earned value over BAC minus actual cost. So in this particular case, our budget at completion is 102,600. Earned value is 78,416. And divided by 102,600 minus 92,300. That's the actual cost, 92,300. So you can see that this number is going to be greater than 1 because the number above the line is greater than the number below the line. So 102,600 minus 7,8,416 divided by 102,600 minus 92300 gives us quite a large performance index of 2.34. 2.347. The meaning of this is that we have to work at twice the speed now, twice our current speed in order to complete this project on schedule. So to complete performance index, this is how fast we need to be completing. We need to be working. We need to be getting 2.3 units of work per every dollar spent, and so on. So that's the relevance of this parameter, and this is an important forecasting parameter. And last two outputs, I guess, are the documents, updates to project plans, and updates to organizational process assets, especially lessons learned. And that concludes the lecture content, and I'm going to stop recording.